A healthier, happier life begins here. Welcome to Mercy Moments, a podcast by Mercy Health in association with True Chat.
Did you know that Ohio has a unique and diverse architectural history? Or that in Champaign County alone, there are numerous styles and periods of design and construction. And many residents are proud of that legacy. So much so that they even have a county-wide home and garden tour. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm the host of Mercy Moments, T. Allen Ceyler, coming to you from Champaign County here at True Chat Studios in Urbana, Ohio. My guest today is no stranger to Champaign County. Please welcome to the program, Robert Pollock. Robert, welcome.
Thank you.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
So I'm not a native of Champaign County, but my family moved here back in 1977, and this has been my home base ever since.
So did you grow up in Champaign County?
No, I came here in my senior year in high school.
Did you really?
Yep, and been here ever since. Spent some time in the Air Force, and this has always been where I returned back to afterwards.
So what attracted you to the area?
Family, friends, great place to live, and it's a wonderful county to be able to reside in and to bring up family.
So, Robert, what's your background?
After college, I spent over 30 years working for the Department of the Air Force. So starting out enlisted, was commissioned, and finished up as a civil servant. And every 3 years, we ended up back at Wright-Patterson. So when we lived at Wright-Pat, we lived here in Champaign County.
So how did you get involved with some of the things here in Champaign County, like the Home and Garden Tour?
Well, the Home and Garden Tour is run by the Champaign County Preservation Alliance. And my parents were early members of the Champaign County Preservation Alliance starting back in 1992. So the Preservation Alliance is something that whenever I was back in Ohio, I was always volunteered by my family to be part of the tour as one of the volunteers.
Right, exactly. You know, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up because we have some amazing resources here in Ohio. And the first one is called the Ohio Memory Collaborative, or OMC. And it can be found at www.ohiomemory.org. The OMC is a partnership between the Ohio History Connection, or OHC, and the State Library. And the OHC can be found at www.ohiohistory.org. The sites, among other things, illustrate the different periods and styles of architecture in Ohio. But narrowing the scope a bit to just Champaign County, I'd like to focus more on where our story begins. So doesn't, as far as architecture go, doesn't it begin with Native American influences?
Yes, it does. The earliest evidence that we've seen comes from the Mississippian or the Hopewell cultures. They left them there. We know them as the mound builders now. We don't have any idea what their homes look like other than from what we can find in archaeology, and they were generally in a round shape. Starting in about 1000 CE to about 1750 Common Era, the Fort Ancient people lived in Champaign County and the area, and their homes tended to be, from what we can tell, parallel rows where sticks were driven in the ground and then covered.
So it wasn't just teepees, it was like a variety of different structures.
Nope. So the Shawnee people were here when the first Europeans came, and the first Europeans were able to record what their homes looked like.
Interesting.
They had large logs that had been bent over into a hoop, covered with bark. So it looked very much like a Quonset hut today, is what they lived in. So we can guess that the Fort Ancient people lived in the similar houses. It's an Algonquin style, familiar to folks in the East, sometimes referred to as longhouses. But
and then at some point we started to see European settlers. Well, why did they come to the area?
They were attracted first by the Indians or the Native Americans, and they came in the form of traders, first French and later English. So we start finding evidence of trading here in Champaign County, just south of West Liberty and just north of West Liberty, where we know that there were French trading houses and English trading houses. And those locations used log-built structures, usually using buckeye because they were very prominent, and also buckeye trees grow very straight and very uniform in size in the trunk.
And then finally, we started to see more permanent settlers, and what groups and cultures were they from?
After the Revolutionary War, many of the people listening may know that the Revolutionary War battle was fought just right to the east of Springfield, and that was called the Battle of Piqua. And the soldiers that were in that battle recognized the grounds in what's now Clark County and Champaign County were excellent for farming, excellent for exploitation, and had good river traffic. And rivers were important because that was how large items were moved up and down from major settlements. So the first settlements in Champaign County started in 1805, and it was the platting of the town of Urbana by William Ward, and his surveyor was a gentleman by the name of Joseph Vance. Mr. Vance eventually moved on and became governor of the state in the 1830s. So all the towns in Champaign County were planned settlements. So after Urbana, then next came was the town of Mechanicsburg, then St. Paris, then North Lewisburg, Thackeray, Westville, and others. But they were all planned, and they were all platted locations. Each one planned to be the major center of population for the county. And that eventually turned out to be Urbana.
So exactly what groups and cultures are we talking about, though?
The original settlers came from the Mid-Atlantic, Connecticut, and Kentucky. They came up as land speculators. Champaign County is divided into two sections of grant lands. You had the Virginia military lands to the east of Ludlow Road, and you had the second Congress grants that were granted for land grants to pay the soldiers what they were owed, soldiers of the Revolution. So most of the states and the colonies didn't pay the soldiers during the Revolution. They made promises of a pension and after the war, and the pension was given in terms of 40 to 80 acres of land.
Interesting. So how did they differ in respect to architecture?
The Virginians and the Kentuckians that came here brought with them the architecture of the Tidewater. It was originally it was a very Georgian, very organized, very symmetrical in patterns for houses that were actually planned. The folks from Connecticut brought with them the salt box of New England and that style. And most of the people simply built what's generally known as vernacular or common houses out of logs. There is still one settler's cottage or settler's log cabin, original, dating from about 1803 or 1804 in North Lewisburg.
Huh.
So it sits behind the home of Max Coates, who was a preservationist himself, and he's preserved it and makes use of it as a guest house.
So did any different period or trend also have an effect on the architecture?
So the architecture in Ohio and in Champaign County specifically followed the national trends. Usually, if it was popular in the East, it became popular out here within 2 or 3 years of that. So there are lots of styles that are out there in certain trends. The first style of houses that became popular as permanent structures, moving away from the logs, were in what's called the Federal style. So the Federal style is very similar to a Georgian house you'd find in the East Coast in the 1770s. But the Federal style was very common out here, and usually it was in the style of, it's called a 5-bay house. It means it has, if you're going across the front, you have 2 windows, a door, and 2 windows. And they repeat that on the second floor, and then a cross gable style. The William Ward House at College and South High Street in Urbana is a really good example of the Federal style. So the Federal style was followed by the Greek Revival style, which itself was influenced by the first buildings that were being built in Washington, D.C. So they followed a Grecian temple style. And these houses were also very symmetrical. They would usually have a window, a portico door with columns on either side, and another window, perfectly square house, a third floor that you could not really tell was a third floor, but it had 3 large inset windows into the top. And these houses you can find them throughout. That style I just described is called the Townhouse Style. And there's a house in Urbana on the corner of Reynolds and Miami Street that sits back. It's a red brick, and it's considered a textbook example of the Greek Revival style. The Greek Revival style was followed. Actually, it continued. Each of these continued and they interbuilt over the years. But the next major style was a Gothic Revival, and this features arches, Gothic arches with peak on the top, multiple chimney stacks, sharp lines with gable fronts and ends. And in Urbana at 400 Scioto Street is a really good example that sits back. It was originally called the Weaver House, and it sits on its own little park and is a really good example of that Gothic Revival.
I had a question. So one thing I've noticed about Urbana in particular is that the houses are very eclectic. In other words, it doesn't seem like from house to house there is one particular style. Like you go down 36 and you'll see one style of house, and the very next house will be completely different. So why did it happen that way?
Today we're used to seeing developments where a builder will set up shop, buy a farm, partition it out, and have a set of 3 or 4 different model houses. That's not the way it worked in the 19th century. Each owner was their own developer. And so it became a matter of taste. Some people traveled a lot to Chillicothe, to Dayton, to Columbus, and they would see styles that they thought were attractive. And then that became what they wanted to emulate.
See, I think that's what makes the Home and Garden Tour here so special, is because you from house to house, it's completely different. Like you just walk down the street and each one's a completely different style. The
Victorian age, that we refer to houses as Victorian. So the Victorian houses actually were in a bunch of styles themselves. So the Victorian age encompasses and started with that Gothic Revival, and then followed by the Italianate, which was supposedly taken out of a Tuscan villa. So there's a house between Urbana and Westville known as the Palace Grove House, which has a perfect example of a Tuscan villa with its tower and everything else. That was on our tour a couple of years ago in an unrestored stage. And we've got a promise that once it's fully restored and brought back to life, we'll be able to have it back on the tour again so people can see before and after.
Well, that pretty much does it for the first segment. In the second segment, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Champaign County Preservation Alliance and the Home and Garden Tour. We'd like to take this time to remind our listeners that all of True Chat's podcasts help pursue a common goal: to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations and information. To learn more about Mercy Moments, listen to the recap at the end of the program. And to search for previous episode or find ways to listen, please visit us at mercymoments.org. Are you in need of medical imaging services? Then look no further. For Mercy Health Urbana Hospital, in its newly renovated Imaging and Women's Center, now offers everything from CT, MRI, and ultrasound to DEXA, and yes, even 3D mammography. Also, our team of board-certified radiologists will work with your prescriber to provide accurate and timely results. To learn more about medical imaging services, please visit us at www.mercy.com. Welcome back. So our topic today has been about the architectural history of Champaign County, the Champaign County Preservation Alliance, or CCPA, and the annual Historic Home and Garden Tour. And our guest today has been Robert Pollock. Robert, welcome back.
Thank you.
So what exactly is the Champaign County Preservation Society?
So the Champaign County Preservation Society is an organization that gathers funds to provide as grants that are used to preserve the architecture of Champaign County. We are the oldest preservation alliance in the state of Ohio.
Interesting.
And we were started because of the destruction of a historic home in Mechanicsburg. So it was called the Rankin House, and it had been on the Underground Railroad and was a famous and architecturally significant home that became a parking lot. So we had some early preservation-minded individuals here in Champaign County that felt it necessary to take actions to prevent historically significant homes from being destroyed in the future.
Now, the CCPA has a website, correct?
It does. It's at www.ccpapreserveohio.org.
And I know the CCPA does a little bit of everything as it relates to the history of Champaign County. In fact, they have things like, vintage train tour and a loft tour and things like that, correct?
That's right. All of them are designed to provide inbound tourism for Champaign County and also to raise those funds for the preservation of commercial buildings and the residential buildings here in Champaign County, principally the buildings built before 1940.
So specifically, how did the annual historical home and garden tour get started?
So soon after the founding in 1992 of the CCPA, we started the tour. It's modeled after a similar tour that's been going on in Marshall, Michigan. And one of the founders of the CCPA, the Bry family, had association with Marshall and pitched the idea to the original members of the Preservation Alliance. Carl and Georgia Pollock were the leaders at that time. And we've been doing it ever since. And since 1993, Sandy and Vince Gonzalez have been the steady hand at the wheel, keeping it going and keeping it going. And we've done it every year until 2020 when COVID made it impractical to be touring people's houses.
So are there any other major players involved?
This is the major players are the volunteers. Almost all of them are residents of Champaign County. It can't be done without the volunteers. We have the organization, or the tour is headed up by the trustees of the Champaign County Preservation Alliance, who then organize into multiple committees. Each of those committees is responsible for ticket sales, finding the houses, setting up the tour groups and the docents, and then working and signing up volunteers for each of the sites on the tour each year. So it takes up to 250 volunteers who spend 2 full days with us, giving us their time, and we very much appreciate everyone that helps us out with the tour and makes it a good opportunity for people to come and see and enjoy Champaign County.
So how does that work? Do you have to train the volunteers, or how does that process work?
Well, we do have training, and we have training for each of the committee chairmen, and we bring everybody together for all the leadership together. We go through a walk through each of the homes and businesses and church to find out the ideal path to in and out, make sure we know the safety concerns, make sure we know where there are steps and the rest, so that our customers and our guests are safe in their activities. And then at the start of each day, all the volunteers are given a briefing on what's going on in that particular house, who the owner is, how to greet the guests, and every room will have some kind of a description that'll be provided to the docents, who will then be able to share that with the guests who come through the home and garden tour.
So when is the tour operated? I mean, when is the timetable? So
the tour actually occurs on the third weekend of June every year. The hours are 10 to 5, and we always have, since we do it in multiple different towns, it's not always the same place for the start and stop. It's always at a place that the local municipal government has set aside for us to have a welcome tent. And the mechanics of the tour are the tickets are made available about a month ahead. You can buy them off of our website. You can also buy them at local banks who volunteer to sell them through their tellers. And when you buy your ticket, you receive a ticket voucher, and you return at the original tent, the home tent. You go there and you exchange your voucher for a tour booklet, which has a complete list of all the houses, a map of how to go from one house to the next, and has a description of each house. And that actually serves as your actual ticket.
Now, I know you brought up the fact that there's always a different beginning and end, but do you generally start out in one particular city, or is it just kind of random?
We actually try to keep the tour within a 3-mile radius of where we're at going, so that there's not that much driving for our guests. And when we can, we like to have houses close enough together that walking is achievable. This past year, it was really easy to walk between almost all the houses.
So are there certain themes and styles that you're looking for, or is it just completely eclectic?
It's eclectic, but our general goal is to be able to show people homes that are being preserved, or are getting ready to undergo renovation. And the reason we want to do that is that our mission is to preserve the houses and the architecture of Champaign County. But we have to be able to show people that an old and decrepit house can be made a modern home for a modern family. So being able to show people all those different styles in one tour give folks a really good idea of how you can live with an antique house and how it doesn't have to be gutted and completely modernized. So it's a way to show people that. So that's what underlies how we select houses and what we show on those houses.
So what are some of the more interesting sites and styles along the tour?
Well, people really enjoy the late Victorian homes, the Romanesque Revival homes that you find on Scioto Street. There's a chateau-esque on Scioto Street in Urbana. There's some excellent Queen Anne houses in Mechanicsburg. In St. Paris, you have a really good colonial revival mansion, the Kaiser Mansion on East Main Street. And on West Main Street in St. Paris, you have one of only two houses of its type in Ohio. It's called the Monitor House. And it was built in the 1830s and it has a second story clerestory, which is a large windowed area. So that's actually has a second floor, but not a second floor. It's a very unusual house style. So there's a really wide variety of houses that you can see throughout the county, and we try to zero in on where we can show a good variety. We've had 3 years ago, we had a little itty bitty workers' house that was raised up next to a factory, and it just was undergoing renovation, and that will be back on the tour in 2 years as a perfect little. As one of our tour guides described it, it's a dollhouse. So we try to show houses. There's not that many houses that have been on the tour multiple times, but we've had over 225 houses since 1993. We've had 16 churches and about a dozen businesses that have been on the tour.
So are the majority of these fixer-uppers, or is it just, well, I guess my question is, what type of buyer generally would buy a house like that?
Well, I'm one of those types. So you want someone that's somewhat eclectic and willing to go do some work. You got to like history. You got to be willing to put up with corners that aren't perfectly square and floors that creak every once in a while. But to answer your first question, most of the houses are perfectly livable and are being used as homes. We usually try to get at least one under restoration in each year. And that way we have something that we can return to in about 5 years after most of the renovation is completed.
So most of them are already functioning homes. It's just,
yep.
You're improving them.
Absolutely.
Well, that pretty much does it for the program today. And it's time again for something that we like to call Caring Corner. Last month, our guests were from the Community Blood Center. And they would like to remind everyone that this year's theme is Socket to Childhood Cancer. And as a part of that, they will be holding a blood drive from August 29th until October 1st. And while supplies last, they will be giving away a free pair of Support the Fight socks to those who donate. To do its part, Mercy Health's Springfield Regional Medical Center will be hosting one of these events on Friday, September 9th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., which is located at 100 Medical Center Drive, Springfield, Ohio, 45504. You can schedule an appointment by going to www.donortime.com. That's www.donortime.com. Or calling the Community Blood Center directly at 937-461-3220. Appointments are preferred, but walk-ins will be accepted. We also have another upcoming event to report. The first annual Pink Honor Walk will take place across from Mother Stewart's Brewery on Friday, September 30th. It will be sponsored by Mercy Health and will be a 1-mile walk followed by an after party. The event opens at 4:30 p.m. and the walk begins at 5:30. Tickets start at $25 and can be purchased by typing in and searching for the first annual Pink Honor Walk. The event itself will be held at 148 West North Street, Springfield, Ohio, 45504. Registration ends on September 28th at midnight, and the event will benefit the Mercy Health Breast Patient Assistance Fund, the Breast Cancer Endowment Fund, and the Sisters United for Prevention Fund. For questions, please contact Tracy Adrian at 937-523-8640. That's 937-523-8640. We'd like to end the program today by reminding our listeners that our goal here at Mercy Moments is to promote local resources, awareness, and involvement. Therefore, if you have any comments related to past episodes or have suggestions For future programs, please contact us at TACEYLER at mercy.com. That's capital TACEYLER at mercy.com. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Robert Pollock, for being here today. You can listen to Mercy Moments on True Chat via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere else fine podcasts are found. For Mercy Moments, Mercy Health Urbana Hospital, and True Chat, I'm your host, T. Allen Ceyler.
And Rob Pollock.
Thanks for listening today. Stay healthy, Ohio.